if we do not get this tax bill done, as I said in my Senate hearings, this is pass-fail for our side of the aisle, and we will have the largest tax hike in history. Bring down inflation, we're going to cut regulations, and we are going to get the tax cut. The goal is still for them to be made permanent. And as you just said, that we are going to use current policy scoring.
All right, there you have it. Pass, fail, and current policy scoring. Scott Bessent, who was here on the show last evening, joining us to talk about this all. North Dakota Senator, Mr. Kevin Cramer, Ohio Senator, Mr. Bernie Moreno. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Senator Cramer, I didn't know this. You feel that most of the Republican senators buy into, I'm going to call it Mike Crapo's idea, Senator Crapo's idea, that it's current policy, which simply means, for viewers, I don't have to go into the baseline, it just means the Trump tax cuts paid for themselves. They did then, they are now, they will in the future. You don't need to score them as 4 or 5 trillion deficits. And that actually Barack Obama used the same convention back in 2012 to keep the George W. Bush tax cuts. That's called current policy. Don't score it. Stop fretting about it. Is that true, really?
That is true. In fact, I don't know many, if any, maybe 1 or 2 Republican senators who don't agree with that. Huh. And largely because we all know Mike Crapo to be a man of honor, intellect, and he understands this stuff better than the rest of us. But the explanation's clear. I mean, Secretary Bessent is exactly right. If we fail, it's a $4.3 trillion tax increase. CBO scores the other way. They score that as revenue. And interestingly, when it comes to spending, they use current policy.
That's right. That's right. They don't score the spending increases.
No.
They only score the tax cuts. So I call it a pinball machine on permanent tilt.
And by the way, they were off by $4 trillion last time. Only that.
Only that much. They admitted, by the way, yesterday, 1.9 trillion. Actual revenues came in, call it 2 trillion, above their original estimate 7 years ago. They admitted that, but that doesn't cause them to change their models. I just don't want to wait. Okay, I think waiting is not a good idea. Now, it may be that the House has to get through what it's going to get through. But if the House can get you a budget resolution, Senator, and it looks like you can parse through all these baseline issues, let's go for it. Let's go for one big, beautiful reconciliation bill. Don't wait.
You know, I'm not hung up on the how. I'm hung up on the what. And at the end of the day, look, the voters expect us to move at 100 miles an hour. The president is moving at 700 miles an hour.
Yes.
So the Congress has to catch up a little bit. So if it's 18 bills or 1, at the end of the day, we have to secure our border. We have to unleash American energy. We have to fund defense. We have to have peace around the world. We have to lower the size and scale of this government.
Yes.
Can't afford it.
That includes tax cuts.
Absolutely.
Lowering the size. I mean, after all, just a thought, okay? I'm going to be a little cynical. Don't take it personally. But you weren't elected president. You weren't elected president. I wasn't elected president. Some of my conservative brethren in the House Freedom Caucus were not elected president. The guy who was elected president was Donald Trump. Yes. He wants the tax cuts now. He's out there. He has his press spokesman, Caroline Leavitt, said as much today. I know they're in there. God knows what they're talking about. That's what he wants. Why don't you give it to him?
Well, Larry, because President Trump needs to become Whip Trump. And he needs to go over to the House Republicans and explain it really simply. And I think he can get what he wants.
He did a pretty good job on the nominations as Whip Trump, don't you think?
I think he did very well. And we're going to finish it off, hopefully, in a matter of days or a week or two. And he'll have his entire cabinet. And I think the same is true when it comes to this. He simply needs to get the House lined up because they don't feel the same way that we all feel right here.
Well, I think I'm hoping that they'll come around. Senator Moreno, are you surprised at how the nominations have gone? How well? I mean, on a seasonally adjusted Matt Gaetz exclusion. Okay, that's all. It's a seasonally adjusted Matt Gaetz.
Is that
exclusion.
a new economic term?
I just made this up. It's what I do as I go along. But basically, President Trump hit 1,000 on the rest of them, didn't he?
He absolutely has, and a credit's due to John Thune as well. Senator Thune is helping shepherd this.
Okay.
J.D. Vance is making a lot of calls, but ultimately, look, every Republican, I hope, understands that on November 5th, this may hurt some of their feelings. The person who really got the mandate was President Trump.
Right.
Like in my case, he won Ohio by 11 points. No human in history has ever gotten as many votes as Donald J. Trump did in Ohio on November 5th. So at the end of the day, the voters wanted his agenda. And I think every Republican better remember that.
Well, I think there's a rumor that Art Laffer's out there in the ether zone someplace. And Arthur, to bring you in with these two very distinguished senators, President Trump wants the tax cuts now. The Laffer curve has worked as it always has. Even the CBO admitted that the revenues came in are 1.9 trillion higher than their estimates 7 years ago. We're talking about something called current policy, which means it's permanent. Let's get it done. You don't have to score it new scoring every year. What do you think about that? He won. Trump won. It's a political matter, okay? He wants tax cuts right away, start the economy, the engine of opportunity for his working class coalition. He should get it. He's the guy who won, Arthur.
Yeah, well, he not only won, but so did the American people win, Larry. And with that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it was amazing what it did to economic growth of the U.S. versus the European Union. It's amazing what it did for poverty. The poor, the minority, the disenfranchised, the less educated, all had the lowest unemployment rates ever. And the tax revenues rose, not fell, in the 2-year period from the fourth quarter of 2017 through the third quarter of 2019. Tax revenues rose by more than they did in the prior 2 years. So it's been a win-win, win-win. Anything that stands in the way of that being extended and being made permanent should be discarded immediately, and these tax cuts should be restored permanently in the U.S.
Arthur, I don't know why, but as a general matter, I mentioned this last night on my riff and in the show. When the Republicans ignore the Laffer curve, when they ignore your curve, when they ignore the benefits of tax cutting, they lose. They lose. And I fear that by postponing it now, for whatever budgetary reasons or whatever reasons you come up with, they're going to ignore the Laffer curve again, they're going to ignore the positive revenue impact again, and they're going to get clobbered politically. This is what history shows, Arthur.
Yes, it is. And, you know, it's not just the Republicans, Larry. If you'll remember, John F. Kennedy was the one who invented the Laffer curve in the 1960s. He did it. He said it would raise more revenues, and it did raise more revenues under Kennedy, especially on the highest income earners. They did it. It should be called the Kennedy curve. It's not. It's called the Laffer curve. But the Democrats should embrace this because this was brought into policy by the Democrats back in the 1960s. But, oh, no. They're now going the other way, going against their whole history and their whole evidentiary-based knowledge. They're going against everything that's science. It's just wrong.
I wrote a book on those Kennedy tax cuts once upon a time.
You sure did.
Senator Marino.
And it was great. You and Brian did a great job in that book.
Thank you. Senator Marino, happy to have you on. You want to renovate, resuscitate, rejuvenate the automobile industry. And I would think, with that in mind, that you would basically favor Mr. Trump's what I call tariff diplomacy, because it's not a level playing field.
Absolutely. Look, we make 4 million cars in Canada and Mexico that are sold here in the United States of America. The impact on Dayton and Youngstown and Lorain and Toledo is devastating. You go to these communities, they were gutted. These were great industrial cities with good, high-paying American jobs. We shipped them off to Mexico. We have to reverse course. We won World War II because in the Midwest, we made a lot of things really fast. And that industrial capacity is a national security imperative. And that starts with the auto industry because it's so significant to our economy.
I know I want to get Senator Cramer back into this, but I know you haven't fleshed out the whole program. But is there one thing that sticks out in your mind that will help these communities? By the way, did you see in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, there was an article about an economic study from the National Bureau of Economic Research, which is a big deal, and actually was lefty academics who came to the conclusion that bringing China into the World Trade Organization and allowing them normalization of trading, even though they had high tariffs, and that's what clobbered the industrial Midwest. These are very liberal academics, but they did incredibly granular homework on this. So that's why this whole thing rings a bell with me.
Absolutely. I was presiding in front of the Senate listening to a lot of Democrat nonsense. And for a second, I thought maybe I tuned into Canadian government TV, and they were advocating for Canada. I'm sitting there going, wait a second, you guys are actually, senators in America, and they're saying, oh, we got to protect Canada, we got to protect Canada and Canadian companies. No, we got to protect American companies and American workers.
Kevin, Senator Cramer, what do you think? What's President Trump's next move on the tariff front? You think he goes to the universal tariff? You know, he's very interested in the universal tariff, 10 or 15%. You know, raise $500 billion and use that to cut taxes. I don't know what you're hearing.
I'm not an expert, but I think at 10 to 15, a universal tariff works because I think in a lot of cases the nations themselves will absorb it. Remember, what he intuitively understands as a business guy, as a negotiator, is leverage. And as I tell my Canadian friends, who I love very much, they're our neighbors, I talk to lots of them every day, they're 41 million people. We're 341 million people. He understands that leverage. I think once you level the playing field, to Bernie's point, then we can have an honest, free market discussion about where things are made, where the supply chain comes from, you know, how you can have a North American continental plan, all of those things. But first, you have to level that playing field, and that's what the tariffs do.
You know, your point, a lot of work has been done on this. The exporters, or let's say China, but whomever, the exporters will really pay most of the tariff. And then the currency changes, the dollar goes up and their currency goes down, so they might wind up paying the vast majority of the tariff. And if we can rebuild our industrial base and our industrial military base, this is why I think Trump's making a lot of sense.
Yep. And then, but you have to also realize that the one thing that does hold us back is workforce challenges. But this is where AI and automation, and by the way, a merit-based or skills-based immigration policy with legal immigration, we can make this work. But first, level the playing field.
All right. Art Laffer, you still out there? I got one more for you, real quick, 30 seconds.
I am still here, Larry.
Universal
Okay,
tariff.
well, I think we should do those tariffs.
Go ahead.
What? Excuse me?
Go ahead. No, go.
Well, we should do those a flat, low tariff and use it to cut the taxes, Larry.
Yes,
but I would
there you
like to
go.
remind Senator
There you
Marino,
go.
and I'm a Buckeye, and I'm so happy with Marino. But Ohio has personal taxes that mean you have a real problem with producing products in Ohio that you don't have in Tennessee. We have a lot of auto production in Tennessee because we're a zero tax state. Ohio needs to become a zero income tax state as well.
He grew up in Ohio.
Amen.
He grew
Amen
up-
to that.
he grew
Amen
up
to
in
that.
Ohio.
Stay tuned. We're going to make that happen.
All right.
And if anybody's watching, Ohio is a much better place to do business with than Tennessee all day long.
All right. I'm going to jump right out of that one. Senators Bernie Marino, we thank you. Senator Kevin Cramer, we thank you. Art Laffer, thanks very much. Folks, coming up here, Kellyanne Conway and Katie Pavlich going to join us next. I'm Kudlow. Stick around.